He brought millions laughter on The Tonight Show, but his own life ended beneath the glow of the spotlight. Johnny Carson, the undisputed lord of late-night television, created a dynasty of fame and wealth. But his tale took a haunting twist. His one-time luxury mansion now stands desolate and haunted, speaking of a man who once dominated TV. In death, secrets about his family, relationships, and wealth stun fans. Johnny Carson was an intriguing paradox. A guy who appeared so comfortable and charismatic to millions on television, yet was astonishingly introverted and shy behind the scenes when the cameras weren't rolling. Far from one of the best-known faces in America, during his time hosting The Tonight Show, his private life was closely guarded. To those who personally knew him, Carson was frequently characterized as the most private public man ever to walk the earth, a description that wonderfully grasped the duality of his character. Off-set, Carson shunned the typical social life one would assume a celebrity of his stature would have. He hardly went to parties and social events, but preferred instead the silence of his private life at home. This side was not merely a matter of choice, but appeared to be based on actual social discomfort. The late Dick Cavett, himself a veteran talk show host and contemporary of Carson's, once commented on this facet of Johnny's personality with a combination of sympathy and understanding. Cavett commented, "I pitied Johnny and that he was so socially awkward. I've scarcely ever met anyone who struggled so hard as he did. It is interesting to look at how a person so naturally charismatic in a formal television setting could struggle so intensely in regular social situations." George Axelrod, a screenwriter and playwright who had met Carson outside of public appearances, best summed it up with a revealing remark. "Socially, he doesn't exist. The reason is that there are no television cameras in living rooms. If human beings had little red lights in the middle of their foreheads, Carson would be the greatest conversationalist on earth." This quote points out that Johnny Carson's genius and charm appeared virtually unbreakable from the accompaniment of an audience, or rather a camera. His talent for entertaining and holding people's attention was his sustenance, and without the formal setting and the theatrical nature of television, he was usually at sea. The domesticity of informal chat, unwritten, and without the cushion of being in front of the audience, was not an easy territory for him to traverse. This hesitation also translated into his dealings with questions about his private life, politics, and society. Johnny was famously secretive about anything that went beyond his public image. Unlike so many celebrities who use interviews to define or reveal their inner lives, Carson hardly ever opened that door. He generally wouldn't talk about his childhood, his politics, or social issues of the day at any depth. Instead, he adopted a more standoffish, nearly whimsical attitude. He distributed pre-prepared sheets of responses to newsmen, effectively avoiding questions that could intrude on his privacy. These prepared responses were frequently enigmatic, teasing, or ambiguous. They consisted of imprecise answers like, "Yes, I did," which could be added to all sorts of questions without providing any detail, or "not a bit of truth in that rumor," a general denial that neither confirmed nor disproved anything definitive. One of his more notoriously bizarre responses was merely, "No, kumquats," a light-hearted expression that left journalists perplexed and irritated, but made perfectly clear his reluctance to take seriously some questions. The private life of Johnny Carson was filled with several major marriages, each a different chapter in his life, and all the entanglements and difficulties that accompany relationships lived largely in the public eye. His marriages present a different side of Carson that is quite different from his suave comedic image on The Tonight Show, exposing the storms of his personal life. Carson's marriage was first to Jody Walcott in October 1949 in North Platte, Nebraska. The marriage, however, was not at all peaceful or stable. Through the years, the marriage was tumultuous, with both partners engaging in infidelities. Their marriage struggled against Carson's growing fame and the stresses typical to most marriages, but especially magnified by the celebrity glare that he was just starting to attract. In the end, after over a decade of marriage, it all concluded in a divorce in 1963. Shortly after, the same year, Carson remarried, this time marrying Joan Copeland on August 17, 1963. Their marriage lasted close to 10 years, yet was also as troubled as the previous one. When they did finally divorce in 1972, the divorce settlement Copeland got was huge for the era, almost $500,000, which would be equivalent to about $3.76 million in 2024 based on inflation. On top of the lump sum, she also got an alimony payment of $100,000 per year and a pretty sweet little collection of art highlighting the financial success and wealth Carson had by this point. Copeland's post-divorce life was more subdued, but every bit as complicated. She remarried, although that union too ended in divorce and died in 2015 at age 83 in California. Significantly, Joan Copeland had no children. In the fall of 1971, while Carson was going through the agonizing divorce process with Copeland, a chance meeting would bring about the most celebrated and financially rewarding marriage of his career. At the elitist 21 Club in New York City, Carson was out having dinner with friends, including fashion designer Molly Parnes. There's where he spotted Joanna Holland, an ex-model who had worked in Paris, and waved at the designer when she walked past. Entranced by the striking beauty of Holland, Carson employed Parnes as a go-between to set up Holland to receive his phone call days later. Joanna Holland, a divorcee with an 11-year-old son, Tim, from a marriage, started dating Carson in late October 1971. Their first date, which coincided with Carson's 46th birthday, was a dinner and theater outing. And once they started seeing each other, Carson allegedly phoned her every day at 4:30 p.m. By May 1972, when The Tonight Show production relocated to Burbank, California, Holland and her son moved to join Carson. He bought a lavish $500,000 Bel Air mansion previously owned by legendary director Mervyn LeRoy, which signaled the start of their life together in Hollywood. The relationship between the couple progressed rapidly, and at The Tonight Show's 10th anniversary bash at the Beverly Hills Hotel on September 30th, 1972, Carson shocked everyone by declaring that he and Holland were secretly married that afternoon. This declaration came as a shock to his friends and colleagues, which was typical of Carson's desire for secrecy and control over the manner and timing of disseminating personal details. Joanna Holland's impact on Carson went beyond their intimate relationship. After spending time with her former husband in sumptuous European resorts like Biarritz, Monte Carlo, and St. Moritz during the early 1960s, Holland familiarized Carson with the luxuries of Western European travel. The pair went to such upscale locales as Antibes Hotel, Du Cap, and the Wimbledon Championships, experiences that Carson reportedly enjoyed in part because he was practically a nobody there and hence untainted by the burdens of fame. In spite of these highs, the union was not shielded from trouble. Through November of 1982, the pair were separated, reportedly upon Holland's insistence because Carson had been unfaithful. After they broke up, Carson relocated from their Bel Air residence to their Malibu beach house. Holland formally petitioned for divorce on March 8, 1983. The divorce process extended over 2.5 years, ending in a thorough 80-page settlement in August 1985. Holland was awarded a whopping $20 million in total, more than $58 million adjusted for inflation in 2024, including the Bel Air Mansion, 3 apartments in Manhattan, including one at the Pierre Hotel and others at 5th Avenue and 62nd Street, as well as expensive automobiles, a Rolls-Royce, a Mercedes-Benz, and an economy vehicle. She also was paid cash through alimony in the amount of $35,000 each month for 64 months. The size of this settlement was unprecedented, indicative of Carson's great wealth and the stakes involved in their divorce. Carson was not reluctant to use this expensive divorce as material for his humor. He joked about the money terms a lot on The Tonight Show, showing his skill at putting personal hardship into humor. In the meantime, Carson's former stepson, Tim, Joanna Holland's son, unfortunately died in 1994 from a pulmonary embolism. Joanna Holland herself survived until July 2025, when she died at the age of 93. Carson's last marriage was on June 20th, 1987, when he wed Alexis Moss. This marriage continued until his death in 2005 and is generally remembered as a more stable time in his life. Branded for his wit, even when it came to matters personal, Carson once quipped, "My giving advice on marriage is like the captain of the Titanic giving lessons on navigation, accepting with levity the many highs and lows he had encountered in his own relationships." In his own life, Johnny Carson's experience as a father was deeply influenced by both happiness and heartache, reflecting the sanctity and complexity of his public and personal lives. With his first wife, Jody Walcott, Carson fathered 3 sons: Christopher, born 1950, Richard Ricky, born 1951, and Barry William, born 1953. These 3 boys were an essential part of Carson's early family life, though the demands of his rapidly ascending television career often kept him away from domestic routines. Among his sons, Ricky was the middle child and carried a deep passion for nature and photography. His passion for recording the natural world led him on many excursions where he devoted himself to his art with passion and persistence. Unfortunately, in 1991, Ricky's life was tragically cut short in a horrific car accident while out photographing nature. This loss caused shockwaves within the Carson family and had a deep impact on Johnny both personally and professionally. The effects of Ricky's death were vividly seen when Johnny Carson came back to The Tonight Show mere weeks following the tragedy. On that show, in a stark and genuinely emotional departure from his typical comedy persona, Carson gave a long and moving tribute to his deceased son. The moment was genuine and heartfelt, uncovering a side of Carson that viewers rarely got to see, the grieving father trying to come to terms with his loss live on television. The sentimental moment was marred, however, when his longtime producer Fred DeCordova gave Carson a cue to wrap up because the show was running long. This disruption was seen by many as inconsiderate and served to cause great distress to the crew and fans. As a result, DeCordova was said to have been banned from the studio floor for the rest of the show's run, showing just how serious and sensitive the moment was for all involved. Carson's relationship with his sons continued to be a big part of his life and eventual broadcasts afterwards. In May 1992, in the final weeks of his time hosting The Tonight Show, Johnny introduced his 2 remaining sons, Christopher and Corey, onto the stage. This public recognition of his family was a touching moment, highlighting a personal aspect that stood in contrast to his strictly guarded private character. The presence of his sons during these last moments reinforced the value of family to Carson, even in the midst of his professional goodbye. Further, in the very last episode of The Tonight Show that Carson presented, the program honored Ricky's memory in a moving and imaginative manner. One of Ricky's nature photos, indicative of his artistic enthusiasm and sense, was featured in the last credit roll. This quiet tribute was a permanent tribute, integrating his son's history into the tapestry of the program that had occupied so much of Carson's life and career. Johnny Carson suffered a major heart attack on the 19th of March, 1999 at his residence in Malibu, California. The assault required immediate hospitalization at a local Santa Monica medical center, where Carson received a significant quadruple bypass operation to allow for the return of blood to his heart. The incident was a pivotal moment in the golden years of a man whose well-being had long been undermined, most notably due to years of extensive cigarette smoking. Carson's affinity with cigarettes was widely understood, even in his early television years. Indeed, in his earliest years as host of his